We are here. All right. How's everybody doing tonight? I want to start by thanking everybody at GDEX for letting me present and for working real hard to get me in at all, because I kind of had to get squeezed in at the end of the schedule. So thank you very much. So I'm here today to show you Tofu Topple. Tofu Topple has been in development for a lot longer than it has any right to have been in development for. That's how game dev goes, though, I guess. It's a grab and drop match 3 competitive puzzle game. Think something like Magical Drop or Puyo Puyo or Tetris Attack. Anything of the sort. The game was developed almost entirely by myself. I've done all of the programming, all of the art assets, the development design. Everything was done by me except for the music, which was done by the amazing Stuart Ferguson. I will probably speak more on him later. Just for now, though, let's go ahead and get started with what kind of game this even is. So, you have a number of characters to choose from. Each one that you pick determines which kind of garbage block you can send at your opponent. Let's just go with the title character Tofu for now, and go against, I don't know, Meat Bun. So, you can move your character back and forth. You can pick up gems and throw them back down. And the goal is to make matches of 3 or more, which then gives you score. So I have 6 points now. The goal is to get to 200 before your opponent. A lot of games like this, the goal is to try to block out your opponent to get their gems to rise off the top. And that's not how it is in this game. I wanted to try to do something a little bit different. So I set the difficulty to easy, so hopefully I should be able to plow through this relatively quickly. There's a lot of fun that you can do as well. You can see I just sent a whole bunch of blocks over to Meat Bun there. So the garbage gems that Tofu sends over all have to be squished. They all function differently. Every character's garbage gem functions differently. Tofu's gems have to be squished, so you have to put a number of blocks on top of them in order to get rid of them. And when they're squished, then that gives points back to me as a player. There's a lot of gems that the goal is to get you more points. There are others where the goal is to simply delay your opponent. Meat Buns is one of the ones that is delay-based, since there's really not a lot you can do with it until the timer on them goes away. Meat Bun's gems are... Sorry, I can't play and concentrate and speak at the same time. Meat Bun's gems are bomb gems, so after an amount of time they'll explode, destroying the blocks adjacent. And one thing that I'm not really doing, because I've never been good at it, is setting up combos of sorts, which is another thing that you can do. So if I say grab these, if you destroy some gems, making other gems fall down onto the lower gems, then that will get you additional points for that. So that's the basics of the gameplay. There's a number of different gameplay modes. There's a campaign, story mode, which maybe we'll play through here in a minute, depending on how much time we have. I'm going to be surprised if I actually take the whole 30. We'll find out. We also have a time trial. Let's be my namesake here. Time trial, where you have 2 minutes to do as much damage as you possibly can. And as you make combos in this mode, instead of making garbage gems, you actually give yourself more time. So it's a way to kind of put off the inevitable I suppose. I'm not sure even the best AI can actually play indefinitely. More music that you can hear. Stuart Ferguson did some absolutely amazing things. The music that he produced was... I never had any qualms with anything that he made. He would send me... I'd give him the character. I'd say, hey, this is the character. This is kind of about what they're like. And he'd be like, okay, cool. And he'd get back to me in a couple of weeks with the best music I have ever heard in my life. So you can see there's a little gauge at the bottom. That's how you make combos. So I have to make another match of 3 before that gauge goes down all the way. And now there's one little dot at the bottom. So I have 1 combo built up. The higher your combo gauge goes, the shorter the timer bar gets. So it's harder and harder to pull off subsequent combos. And it actually caps at, I think, 5, where at that point it just instantly makes the combo. Now, funnily enough, even though that I made the game, I'm not actually super amazing at it. Hilarious enough. I've seen a couple people in testing that are literally twice as good as me at this game. So I like to think that there's a pretty decent skill ceiling on this. So the game I originally came up with... Come on, get over there. So I originally came up with the idea for this when it was inspired by Magical Drop 5. Because I'm a big fan of Magical Drop and the Magical Drop series as a whole, and I was really excited when Magical Drop 5 came out. I think a lot of people were. But I was kind of sad that Magical Drop it released in kind of an unfinished state. So yeah, I was kind of sad that Magical Drop released in sort of an unfinished state, and they were working really hard on keeping it updated and improving it. But I think eventually their producer, I think they lost funding to continue working on it, so you were left with a game that was just not up to the par that everyone wanted it to be. And so I said, I'm going to make my own game, and that's where we are. So in making the game, let's go ahead and input a secret code here. So these two AIs will play against each other. So, knowing that I wanted to make the game, knowing what I wanted to do with it, I did a lot of research then into what other games of the genre did, what brought them, what made each one unique, what creative or interesting things that they did, and also what I wanted to do. For starters, one thing that I loved about Magical Drop was all the different characters that you could play as, and what each one brought to the table. They all played differently. They all made things work differently, and I wanted that. I wanted a large cast of characters. And if I'm going to use a large cast of characters, I kind of have a universe that I always go to that I call Welgaia. And the characters that are from Welgaia are the characters that I brought into this game. So each one of these characters has a pretty rich history, and they're all pretty well fleshed out. Though this game, for the campaign mode, this was the first time that I ever got to sit down and actually write dialogue of all these characters interacting with each other and it was a genuine experience. It gave me a level of insight into each one of the characters that I hadn't had before. It was fun, though, because when I sat down with a blank slate, it was hard to figure out what they would say, how they would handle each other. But once they started going back and forth, they just kind of wrote themselves. And I found the kicker for that was which one of these characters would talk first? They're dropped in a room together. Which one would address the other first? The one on the left says something first. What does she say? Is she aggressive about it? Is she polite about it? What would she say first? And then from there, everything wrote itself, and that was the dialogue. It was great. So the other thing, in taking inspiration from Magical Drop, was with Magical Drop, the goal is to top out the opponent. And that was something that I always had a bit of frustration with as a player, because it felt like I could be playing my heart out and just never quite dealing that finishing blow. So I wanted something a little more concrete. Something akin to a health bar from a fighting game. And that's where the quota system came in, which is something that was in Magical Drop, but I brought it absolutely to the forefront in here. Your goal is to... Is the AI bug? The AI is bug. No, there we go, we did it. Okay, I'll get to that later, too. So, that introduced the quota system. So the goal of each match is to reach that quota. It's not actually to block out your opponent. So, a race to that quota then, and each character, which I wanted to bring in. So in these kind of games, sending garbage to your opponent is a very common thing. But most garbage is just a large swash of blocks for the opponent to fight through. And I didn't want to top off the opponent for that to be the focus. So instead I came up with the idea of sending much fewer gems that did more. So we came up with this garbage block idea, where each character, because I wanted each character to play uniquely, sends a different gem to the opponent. So Rhina on the left sends the roulette block over to Karen, and Karen sends the wisp block over to Rhina. And each one of these plays differently. So that's most of the inspiration that got me where I am today, that got the game into what it is. I was also looking into complaints, what other people didn't like about other games, and just trying to make a game that I feel like was everything that I wanted the game to, everything that I wanted it to be. Now, I am an indie developer. I'm solo developer, do all of it myself, and on top of that, I have both a day job and I work, am pseudo-professionally a Let's Player on YouTube. So I already have the equivalent of a full-time and part-time job, so I didn't have a lot of time to work on this. Which is why the development took so long. When you're only working on a game a couple hours over the weekend, it'll take a little while, but we got here. We toughed it out. Speaking of that, I actually streamed the entire development of this game, every painstaking minute of it. You can find those on my Twitch. Most of them are saved on Twitch. The ones that weren't have been uploaded to my secondary YouTube channel, Dr. Godpants. So, we have that. Back to the game itself. there's a lot of things that I had to do in this game that I had never really done before. Primarily 3 things, because as I mentioned, all of the UI, all the character art, the characters, everything was done by me. The backgrounds, I've drawn characters before, but I've really not drawn backgrounds before. So I had to sit down and teach myself how to draw landscapes. I watched a couple Bob Ross videos, and that's how I learned. That was still an experience, though, and I can look back and see how bad some of the early ones were, and I've had to go back and touch them up, just as I had to improve so quickly over such a short amount of time as I learned how to draw these landscapes. Other things. It seems like every time I develop a game, I learn something not to do in the future. And with this one, it was 2 things. One is programming an advanced AI. If you want to program an AI for a platform or something, a monster that walks back and forth, maybe shoots at you if you're at the same Y coordinates as it, I can do that. Teaching an AI to play a competitive puzzle game was painful. And I've gone back and refined it. And right now, they're pretty well off. I'm proud of what I got them to. The last thing that I've also vowed never to do again is program netcode. This game has netcode. You can play online with friends if you know somebody else that can play one. I don't know if there's anybody in the chat that happens to have the game. The game is available currently on Steam. Right now, you can go buy it. It is $9.99. It released a week ago. A week and 2 days ago. But you can play online. So the online play goes through Construct 2's, because the game was programmed in Construct 2, it goes through Construct 2's networking servers. So I'll go ahead and make a new room here if someone has. I'll wait for a moment and see if somebody hops in. So what the networking servers do is they're really only a means of connecting you to other people. So it's a signaling server, I think. So, hey, Hypo made it in. So once Hypo has connected to the signaling server and connected through that to me, we're now connected directly to each other, and we're not going through construct servers anymore. So, another thing here, there's a chat, which I put in the middle so you can talk to each other just for this, and you can actually change the quota as well. Let's go ahead and make it 150. Ready up, in we go. I don't know how much of the game Hypo has played. I know there are a bunch of people that bought the game, but haven't had a chance to play it a lot yet. My brain stopped. I found I can only play the game for a certain amount of time before my brain just kind of stops working. I'm not entirely sure what to reference for that. Oh man, Hypo's sending it at me now. Nope, my brain stopped. Hypo's pulling ahead. Oh, jeez, I almost topped myself out. So, you can, despite that it not being the goal, you can, in fact, still top yourself out. There needed to be some kind of failsafe for if you get your crap to the top of the screen. Oh! Hypo pulled it out in the end. Oh, yeah, Paz. Okay, so sorry, Paz, you do have to beat the story before you can play online. You can beat it on any difficulty because I felt like I didn't want players to be able to, with no experience with the game's raw components, so to say, I didn't want people to jump right into netcode with no idea what they're doing. So I do force players to play through the campaign mode. I also didn't want people to ignore the campaign mode. I put a lot of effort into that. But I do force people to play the campaign mode once in order to unlock online, as well as extra difficulty. But I also wanted to be as accessible as possible, which means you can beat campaign mode on any difficulty, even easy, the easiest difficulty. And the easiest difficulty lowers the quota to 100, so you don't have to go the full 200, just 100. And the easy AI moves painfully slow. Okay, so Hypo, I'll do one more, because this is something interesting that some people brought up that you can do. I'm going to change the quota to 1. This is purely, there's no main strategy, there's no making matches, there's no sending garbage to your opponent. Quota of 1 is a quick draw. How fast can anyone make a single match? And it's cool because while you're watching the blocks come up, you're already planning, what do I do? How do I most efficiently make this? Oh, you gave me a bad one, crap. Did it! Okay, thank you very much, Hypo. I'm gonna back out real quick so I can show off a couple other things. Good to see the intro again. So there's a couple other things that the game has. I showed time trial. It also has an endless mode where the endless mode, instead of having a time limit that counts down that you can increase, endless mode actually advances the gems automatically. Normally you have to advance manually. This advances them automatically, and it goes faster over time. So eventually it'll just go too fast for you. So that's endless mode. There's the campaign mode, where you can see everybody playing. There's a tutorial, which a couple people were asking me to put in, so I said, you know what? I built this game, I know it inside and out, I don't need a tutorial. But if someone else says they do, then they for sure do. There's also a couple extras. You can see the scores that you got, which I got that one earlier in Time Attack. Extras is also where bios are. As you beat the campaign with a character, it unlocks their bio. And you can see a little bit more about them and how they fit into the, well, Gaia universe. And I've got all the characters in here that you can play as. I've not actually unlocked any of them because I am playing this directly on Steam. As I mentioned, you can play this game on Steam. It's right here. You can do it. What else do we have? So I suppose I can do real quick. Let's see if I have time for this. A real quick rundown of all the characters, who they are, and what their garbage gems are. So we have Tofu, who has the Tofu gem. This one is... You can pick it up and move it, but the only way to get rid of it is to squish it by putting 3 gems on top of it. When you do that, the score goes back to Tofu. So it's kind of more of a staller. It doesn't get Tofu a lot of score. Naka's gem is the sword gem. When thrown, it immediately destroys itself and destroys all gems in the column on either side of it. And that sends all that score back to Naka. This is not a staller at all. You can get rid of the gem almost immediately. However, it gets Naka a lot more score. Isami is very similar to Naka's gem with the punch gem. As soon as you throw the gem, it destroys 1 gem on either side of it as well as the one below it. If you stack the gems together, it will repeatedly punch its way down. So, very similar in that it gets more score. Karen's gem is the Wisp gem. This one only destroys itself when it touches the bottom of the playfield, and it will actively burn through gems to drill its way down to the bottom in order to destroy itself. So very much about getting Karen more score, but also kind of a staller, maybe half and half. Meat Bun has the bomb gem, which is very much a staller. You can't move it, you can't do anything with it, you just have to wait for the countdown to go before it destroys the gems adjacent to it, sending that score back to Meat Bun. You can destroy the gem early by throwing a gem directly on top of it. This does send Meat Bun an additional point of score, but if you're actively waiting on that gem, it's a quick way to get it out of the way. Rhina's roulette gem spins around for a random amount of time, and when it stops spinning, it matches chaining in whatever direction it landed on, sending all that score back to Rhina. This can potentially, if it links with the wrong gem, send Rhina a ton of score. But mostly it's a staller. Much like Meat Buns, it can't be moved, you just have to wait for it to go away. Though you can, again, throw a gem on top of it to trigger it early. Morgana's gem works like a more common garbage gem in these kinds of games, where you simply have to make a match next to it, and it will turn all of those gems into regular gems. Morgana does get the score for the gems that are destroyed, as well as her own gems. But it is more of a staller than anything. Actually, I think we changed that so the match you use, the score from the match you use doesn't go to anyone. Yuki has a very interesting trash gem in that it's not really a gem. She has little ghosts appear on the other opponent's, on the opponent's side of the screen, and as you make matches over top of that, because you can put a gem behind it, if you make a match over top of one of those ghost gems, the ghost gem is destroyed and all the score from that match goes back to Yuki. Very much pure score. You can completely ignore them gameplay-wise, but if you do, you're going to be sending Yuki a lot of score. And then finally, Ogre, who has the rainbow gem, who has, much like Morgana's, you have to make a match with it in order to get rid of it, and it toggles between different colored gems, so you have to use those colors in order to actually make a match with it. So those are all the gems, those are all the characters. Last thing I want to show off, and something I want to introduce while I do that, is Extra Mode. You can see we have Hard, good for experts, and Extra, which is good for no one. So difficulty in this game is purely chosen by, or is purely determined by how long the opponent waits between movement. So I thought, what happens if I set that to 0? So, the ridiculous thing about Extra Mode, it's not intended to be human, it's kind of a joke difficulty. But it can actually be beaten if it's stalled correctly. So there's Extra Mode, if you want an extra challenge. So the very last thing that I want to say, I don't know if I have enough time or if GDEX is going to cut me off, it may be too late already. But the very last thing that I want to say is I want to hold a tournament. I'm not entirely sure when, probably in the coming months, but I want to hold a tournament. And the winner of that tournament, when it's done, is going to get their own character added to this game. They'll work with me to integrate the character into Well Gaia lore, to make music for the character, to come up with a gem for the character, everything. And there'll be an additional character specifically for them. So that's the last thing I wanted to mention. Thank you again, GDEX, for having me. I believe I'm wrapping up the show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for GDEX over the course of the whole weekend and supporting game development as a whole. There's been a ton of amazing games out there shown over the course of the past few days. Thank you, GDEX, for showing us off and helping us get our games out there. And props to everybody else who showed games over the course of the weekend. Until next time, everyone, it's been great fun.